This is the Olympus HLD-9 grip for the E-M1 Mark II and E-M1 Mark III. So I'm gonna unbox it quickly. So there's this instruction set. On the instruction leaflet, you can see that it says the grip takes a BLH1 lithium-ion battery and is compatible with the AC-5 adapter, and it shows the dimension and that it weighs 255 grams, and its operating temperature is between -10 and 40 degrees, and also in terms of humidity between 30 and 90%. And in terms of splash resistance when attached to the camera, it has an IPX1 rating, and it says under Olympus test conditions. So just some information about the grip, as well as this leaflet. It's a warranty leaflet in there, and apart from that, there's just the grip itself. So there you can see it has two back buttons, the arrow pad, the OK button, a lock lever, and front dial, back dial, and the shutter button. So there's no buttons here on top front part. And that's the lock wheel. And here you have the battery compartment, and it also gives you the directions of how to enter the battery. And there you have the DC port, which you can use with an AC-5 Olympus adapter or any other adapter that provides 9 volts of power with up to 5 amps of current. So if I close this and lock the battery compartment, I can pull this up, and here you have access to the DC port. So the grip can take one BLH1 battery, which I have here, so I'm going to insert it. And you can see the direction for inserting the battery here on the battery compartment door. And then lock it in place. Before I attach it to the camera, I have to remove this, which reveals the terminal connection. And on the camera, I have to remove this plastic part. And there you can see the connections. So on the grip, there's a part to place this plastic part from the camera so that you don't lose it. And then this will go into the camera, as well as the 1/4 inch 20 screw, and these will get lined up. And then the only thing I have to do is just screw it with the lock wheel. So the grip is compatible with the AC-5 adapter or any alternative source of power which can work with it at 9 volts. And this takes a standard barrel connector, which is 5.5 millimeter external diameter and 2.5 millimeter for the internal diameter. So if it matches that size and provides 9 volts of power and up to 5 amps of current, then it should work. And the grip itself adds 255 grams of weight to the camera. And the weight is without having a battery inside it and without the terminal cover, which is this small plastic piece. So the grip is splash resistance and IPX1 rated. It can be operated in temperatures between -10 to 40 degrees and an operating humidity between 30% and 90%. So one of the advantages of adding this grip is that you get a larger grip on the landscape part. So in addition to getting a portrait grip, even on the landscape part, you get a larger grip. So all your fingers should be able to fit easily. And then you also have the portrait grip. The grip feels a little bit different on the portrait one than it does on the landscape. So if you look here on the landscape, it kind of curves back quite quicker. So here is quite thick and then it goes quite thin there. Whereas on the portrait grip, the difference is less, so the grip is bigger overall, and it curves seems to be less of a difference between the largest part and the smallest part. So the advantage of adding this grip is that you get additional runtime with two batteries, so one battery in the grip and one battery in the camera itself. And you can also choose the order in which the batteries should be used. So PBH stands for power battery holder, which is the grip, or the Olympus term for the grip, and then body battery, which refers to the battery in the camera. And another advantage of having this grip is that you can use the camera without having any batteries in it. So if you plug in the AC-5 adapter or the required voltage into the grip using this DC port, then you can run the camera without having any batteries. Another thing with the E-M1 Mark III is that if you're using the HDMI port, you can't use the USB-C port to power the camera at the same time. So if you insert a USB-C power into the camera, then the HDMI will switch off. So you can either charge the camera using USB-C or you can use the HDMI port. So one way to get around this problem is to use the HLD-9 grip and then use the power option here for the DC port. So you insert power from this port, and then you can be powering your camera as well as using the HDMI port at the same time. So some of the disadvantages of this power grip is that you cannot charge batteries in the camera or in the grip using the DC port. You can charge the battery in the camera using USB-C, but that's not going to charge the battery in the grip. And the other disadvantage is that once you connect the grip to the camera, you cannot use power delivery with USB-C. So let me just show this quickly. So here you have the camera running from the power battery holder, and if I plug in USB-C power for power delivery, you can see that nothing happens. It's still using the battery from the grip as opposed to switching to USB-C. So that's another disadvantage. One of the disadvantages of all the Olympus grips is that once you attach the grip, you don't have access to the battery in the camera. Whereas on Canon and Sony grips, usually you have a door here or a door on the back, which you can use to insert the two batteries, and they have this piece going into the camera battery compartment. So you have access to both batteries at the same time, but you don't have that option on any of the Olympus grips. So the only way to access the battery in the camera itself is to detach the grip and then access the battery. And I would say the lock wheel on this grip is really narrow, so it's a bit difficult to lock the grip into place. You have to exert a lot of force, but that could also be a good thing because it means that if it gets hit by accident, it's less likely to unscrew itself and detach from the camera. So you could see this as a positive or a negative. It's a bit more difficult to screw in place, but it also is less likely to get unscrewed. And in terms of buttons, you can see that you have two back button functions. So you could use them for back button focusing or setting exposure or whatever else. And then you have the arrow pad, the OK button, and a lock if you want to lock all the functionalities on this, or if you want to use it, you can unlock it. And on top, you have the two dials and a shutter button. So you don't have any buttons here on top like the record button or exposure, which you have on the main camera itself. In terms of comparing the HLD-9 grip with the E-M1X, I think the grip on the E-M1X is far superior to the grip on the E-M1 Mark III, and that's for both landscape and portrait directions. So if you can see here, this is the E-M1X and this is the E-M1 Mark III. You can see how much bigger the grip is on the E-M1X. And also when you look at it from a portrait perspective, you have the shutter button, the dials, and you also have two buttons here on the front. And on the back, you have the auto exposure lock button and the dial, and then you have a joystick. And I think the joystick is more important than the arrow pads. Also, the lock lever has 3 options, so you have a custom lock where you can actually adjust which buttons you want to lock or not. So I would say the portrait grip on the E-M1X is far superior to the HLD-9 on the E-M1 Mark III. There are a few features that the E-M1 Mark III has and the E-M1X doesn't have, and vice versa. So for example, the E-M1 Mark III I think can take 10,000 pictures when it comes to creating time lapses, whereas on the E-M1X is 1,000. Also on the E-M1 Mark III, if I remember correctly, you can save your custom mode settings for your custom mode dials to get updated automatically when you change the settings. And I think you couldn't do this on the E-M1X. And also the tracking and human face and eye detection is marginally better on the E-M1 Mark III. But then the E-M1X has subject detection, so it can, identify birds or trains and planes and that kind of stuff. So that's a different feature that the E-M1X has that the E-M1 Mark III doesn't have. But overall, in terms of grip size and ergonomics, the E-M1X is definitely far superior, but it is also bigger as well. So you should be able to see that here. In terms of the width of the grip and the thickness, and here as well. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions or if you want me to demonstrate something with this grip.